tonight I'm really going to just share my story, as simple as that sounds, and kind of God's work in my life and what I'm doing now. And I think, my story is really a story of God's mercy. And I don't think for some of you, it may not seem that crazy or different. It might sound a little bit like your own story. I grew up, as you know, here in Indianapolis, in a strong, loving Catholic family. I went to Catholic school my whole life, here in Indianapolis and even in New York City at Fordham University. And I was really surrounded by such a wonderful community and a strong faith foundation. But, towards the end of high school and college, I kind of had that typical college experience. I think I lost reasons as to why I believed the things that I did. I didn't understand how my Catholic faith really affected the way that I lived my day-to-day life. I kind of became relative about everything. I thought, well, as long as my heart's in the right place and I have good intentions, I can kind of figure my own way out along the way. And I think in some sense, I kind of was living two different lives. I went to Mass on Sunday sometimes when I went away to school, and throughout the week I just kind of lived the status quo, kind of what's expected in college. And I think we kind of all know a little bit of what that entails. Lots of nights out, lots of partying and hanging out with guys that I was sort of dating, sort of not, getting into trouble, and I wasn't living the most chaste or good life. And I think in some ways I was really just getting by. I thought, well, if this is just the way it is, this is how everyone's living, and I might as well just make the best of it. And I think, what happens for a lot of young women is that they find their identity in the way they look and who they date and their relationships. They use those as their guideposts for how they see themselves. So within this context, I'm in New York City. I'm kind of living a life that's in contrast with everything that I profess to believe on Sunday. And I ended up getting my last year of school, I get an internship with Elle magazine. It's kind of a funny story how I got that internship, but I worked in the fashion news department for a year, and I got to see kind of, if anyone's ever really want to know what the glamorous magazine world in New York City is like, it's not glamorous at all. It's very much like The Devil Wears Prada. Like, picture running around the city, sweating in tears, carrying like a box of wigs and a pile of moleskin notebooks, and freaking out because I couldn't find the right color of notebooks. And my editor was going away to Paris for the day, and I was going to be killed if I didn't get it. And so I'm in this environment, this very vicious, negative, cutthroat environment as a young girl in school, running around New York City, not knowing what I was doing, in tears almost every day. I remember crying over a box of purses, and I thought, what's the point? It's fashion. Why am I crying over purses? And what's this all for? Fashion for fashion's sake. It just didn't make any sense to me. And being in this really tough industry, in a not glamorous job at all, and looking at who these women were as editors, I thought, do I really want to be you in 10 years? Do I want to kill myself to be unhappy and workaholics and miserable? And so anyway, long story short, while I was working at Elle magazine and keeping up with my lifestyle as I was, in some ways I hit rock bottom. My boyfriend at the time just broke up with me for a really bad reason. It was because I wouldn't sleep with him. And I had done everything else, but he said, oh, I don't, that's kind of what was worthwhile for him. He dumped me for that. I didn't have any girlfriends because I didn't know how to make good girlfriends because I was a serial dater. And I was just struggling. I was in the office at Elle, and I thought, I kind of hit rock bottom, and I was desperate. So out of my desperation, I actually Googled theology on tap. And the reason I Googled theology on tap, where we're all here tonight, is because my older sisters used to actually go to that. I thought, I think there's something called theology on tap for young adults, I think they all get together. I don't know what it is. I guess I'll Google it. So I did, and it happened to be that very night. There was one going on right down the street from my office in Times Square. So I thought, oh wow, that's strange. Okay. So I leave the office. I go by myself. I show up, not knowing anybody. Here I am, no friends. Show up at a Theology on Tap. Very, very similar to this, except a lot smaller because everything in New York is smaller. And after that night, everything changed for me. The second person that I met that night at Theology on Tap, he was the young adult outreach guy. So of course his job, and it was completely genuine, authentic. He said, "Hey, why don't you come to a young adult mass? We're all going to hang out tomorrow night." I'm like, okay. And then he's like, "Oh, hey, we're going to be doing this." I thought, okay. I didn't have any friends, so I just kept going to these things. Sound really pathetic right now, I know. It wasn't that bad, but I was really looking to meet some good people. And so after that night, I kind of started showing up to these different events in New York City, and I was still actually at school. I hadn't graduated yet, so I was hanging out with these kind of people in their mid-20s, a little bit older, and for the first time in my life, I met people who were awesome, people I wanted to hang out with on the weekends and have fun with, but they were really all striving to live out their faith in a very real, practical way in the day-to-day. And I never had really seen that. Despite all my years growing up in Catholic school, I had never really seen that kind of authenticity. And it changed me completely, because I looked up, I met some new girlfriends, and I looked up to them. I wanted their sense of, they didn't have it all together, none of us do. But there was a peace about them and a joy, and I wanted that for myself. So I'm going to kind of go fast through this, and this might sound crazy because I went from one extreme to the next, but in the next 6 months, right after I had started getting more involved in things, I started going to daily mass at my school. And I thought daily mass was kind of weird. I thought, oh, people who go to daily mass are really intense, and I don't know really anybody who does that. But I found out my senior year that there's actually daily mass in all of my buildings. Don't know how I didn't know that my whole school time at school. And so I started showing up to daily mass, which is very strange for me, but I kept going because I love the intimacy of it and the quietness. It was very different than the regular Sunday mass I used to always go to. So what happened was, after one mass, I just stayed after for some prayer. I was by myself in this little tiny chapel, and it was one of those moments that you hear about, and you're like, oh yeah, sure, but it happened to me that I looked at the crucifix, and in that moment, nothing else mattered to me. It's a real gift given to me to feel that so acutely, but everything else melted away. Christ on that cross was everything. And I just knew from that moment on, I didn't really want to live for anything else, because I had done everything else, and it wasn't working out for me. I was miserable, I was insecure, didn't know how to have real relationships, I was struggling with anxiety and body image disorders, all of the things that a lot of women are, especially in college. But by the grace of God, in that one moment, I just thought, this is all that really matters. And so, fast forward, within the next 6 months, I kind of did extreme things. I kind of go big or go home. So, someone actually suggested to me, a very good friend had said, well, have you ever done a dating fast? And I thought, what's a dating fast? He's like, well, I know some really good women who've actually just taken time off of dating and hanging out with other guys. I was like, oh, okay. I kind of cried because I didn't want to do it, but I knew I had to. I thought, oh, I can't do that. Can I have some guy friends? And can I just, go on some dates? And like, no, actually, it was the most beautiful time, because I took 6 months and I really got to get to know Christ in a very different way. I relied on Him in a way I never had before. I made really wonderful, good girlfriends that I still have today. And in that midst of the dating fast, I read Love and Responsibility. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Love and Responsibility. It rocked my world and changed my life. It kind of made theology of the body make sense. But Love and Responsibility is written by John Paul II, before he became Pope, actually. And so I encourage, we can talk about it after the talk, but that really changed the way I thought about loving a friend, loving another person, loving myself. So it changed everything. And then I did the biggest bang of them all. Is after the dating fast, I did a consecration to Jesus through Mary. And if any of you have ever heard of a consecration or haven't, it's kind of a big, scary word, and I was really scared to do it. I thought, what does this mean? But I think Mary, Our Lady, was really speaking to me to really ask for her help in a lot of ways in order to love Christ more and become the person the woman she was. Sounds like New York. So I did a total consecration to Jesus through Mary. And I know that's a lot of information all at once, but honestly, going through all that, it just made all of a sudden the desires of my heart and my heart for God were finally in line with the way that I wanted, like with how I was actually living. I always felt like I was two different people, a different girl on Sunday and different on the rest of the week, and I always felt so much anxiety and tension. And so for the first time, it was so freeing. I was just living what I believed. And I wasn't perfect, but I was trying. I was actually trying, and I had good people surrounding me. So kind of the context of, so here I am living in New York. I'm outside, and I finished school. I stopped Elle. I was working at Elle magazine, had this big reconversion, and I left the fashion industry thinking I don't want any part of that ever again in my life. It really started. It was a really bad experience. It really tore me apart, and I thought, what's the point anyway? It's like, I like fashion, that's why I got the internship, I enjoy it. I was an English major, I love to write, I love the creativity of it. But that industry, it's like, why would I put myself through that? And so I was working at an internet company in New York City, paying for rent. And in the midst of all this, because I was living this new life, I could look back and I realized, oh my gosh, I could see things so much more clearly. So my beauty and my worth, that whole struggle that I had, I always thought the more attention I got from men, this is like before I kind of had my reconversion, I really thought unconsciously that the more attention I could get from men, that must mean that I was attractive, and if I was attractive, that must mean I'm beautiful, and if I'm beautiful, then I'm worthwhile. And it was always this game, this exhausting game of trying to be attractive enough or act in a certain way to get a guy's attention and to affirm me and my worth. And in reality, I think I realized it's just the complete opposite. It's when you know that you're worthwhile in and of yourself, because you're full of dignity, as a daughter or a son of God, that in and of itself is beautiful. And beauty naturally attracts. And it attracts people to your goodness in a way that is completely freeing. It's not the rat race anymore of trying to be somebody or look a certain way or feel a certain way in order to prove that you are doing great and you're worthwhile and you're good. So it broke that cycle for me. It was such a freeing realization. And while I was realizing my own identity, my own worth, and my beauty, I really fell in love with the idea of modesty. Which is crazy, because the word modesty makes me cringe. And it still does, even though I love it. It's like such a that word has a connotation of brown burlap sacks, and a complete rejection of beauty, and of shape, and it's just like, you get terrible images in your head when you hear that word. And also the word too is used so negatively in terms of modesty is about its relation to men. Oh, modesty is to protect the gaze of men, and it's always about helping our brothers in Christ. Which, yes, that is a good thing, and that is one of the parts of modesty, but it's not everything. And I think women feel a natural aversion and be like, well, why is it my fault? Men should be better, you know? So, it kind of rubs us the wrong way. I think, why is it up to us to dress in a certain way for men? What I think is really interesting, actually, in Love and Responsibility, John Paul II says, first and foremost, modesty is good for the woman herself. First and foremost. He doesn't mention anything about its relationship to men and all that temptation kind of lingo. He said it's very positive and good for the woman. And I think what modesty does, if you think about a work of art, when you look at a masterpiece, your eye travels across the whole painting and you're just taken in by the beauty of the art. In reality, that's what we want our clothes to do. We want to draw the eye across the whole person, and our clothes can actually do that. Rather than when you focus on just one part, if you think about it, when you focus on one part of art or a photo, you're objectifying it. That's kind of what actually pornography is. It's all about focusing on certain points within the image instead of taking in the wholeness and the goodness of the piece. It's like what we want our clothes to do. When we have when we focus on one body part or try and show off a certain thing, it actually, you end up in some way objectifying a little, or not helping other people see all of who you are. And so finding that realization, a little story real quick about that, bringing it to home. I went out to the beach. This idea of modesty was coming sort of like I was thinking about it, and I went to the beach with friends, and I had worn a bikini my whole life, pretty much. So I threw my bikini on, went to the beach with friends, and all the girls there were wearing these one pieces. I'm like, oh wow. I never felt so uncomfortable in my bikini until I was surrounded by all these girls in one pieces, and they were just having a great time. They were just, we were with a bunch of guys and girls as friends out to the beach, and they just felt so free and comfortable, and I was really uncomfortable. And anyway, I'm going on for a while, so I go on tangents, but it's a good story because this is what really changed a lot about the way I think about clothes and fashion. I left the day from the beach feeling really uncomfortable, and so I thought, gosh, the next time we go, I'm definitely buying a one piece. And I went to Target online, ordered a one piece, came in the mail at the office. I put it on in my office. I tried it on at the office bathroom to see how it fit. And I remember looking in the mirror thinking, oh, I feel like a grandma in this one piece. Like I hadn't worn one piece since I was 10 years old, 12, 13 years old. And I was really embarrassed to now wear the one piece. I thought, man, it's so obvious. It looks like I'm trying to cover up. It looks like I'm uncomfortable. Well, what's funny is I ended up wearing that one piece to the beach the next time we went with friends. And I remember one of my guy friends came up to me and he goes, Janet, you look beautiful. I was like, really? I feel kind of dumb. He's like, no, I can see all of you. And you just look so comfortable and beautiful. And I thought, oh, I said, thanks. And then I ran out in the water and had fun, didn't worry about my suit falling off. I just was jumping around and having fun with friends. And so after that, I think my whole understanding of oh my gosh, clothes have such a powerful, fashion is a powerful tool for communicating our own worth. And I think modesty, the whole idea of it, really invites other people to see you differently, and invites yourself to see yourself differently and infinitely more worthwhile. So this is kind of giving context for how I started Verily magazine.